Okay, I think we can start. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So this is Alfredo again. This is the second session of this ntopng training. Today we will talk about the installation, so we'll see all the supported operating systems and platforms. We will talk about the licensing of the software, how we manage the maintenance and software updates. And we'll see a little bit of hardware sizing and tuning. This will be just an introduction to hardware sizing. Then in session 4, we'll see a little bit of tuning of the software. And in the last session, where we will talk about the historical data retention, we'll also see the sizing of the system based on the amount of historical data that you want to store in the system. So let's start with this session. So here you can see all the platforms that we support. If you go on packages.ntop.org, that's where we have the links to download the software or the repositories that you can configure on Linux, for instance, to install our packages. So as you can see, we support many Linux distributions, including Debian, Ubuntu, CentOS. We try to support, for instance, for Ubuntu, the LTS version. And we try to support the last 2-3 versions. For instance, we support Ubuntu 18, 20, 22, CentOS 7, 8, etc. In addition to Linux, we support also Windows, macOS, FreeBSD, and distribution based on FreeBSD like OpnSense and pfSense. We have images for Docker, so containers. Of course, we support virtual machines. We have also packages for the Raspberry Pi. Now, we usually maintain 2 branches for each application. So we have the development branch and the stable branch. The development branch is what we use for developing the software. So it's where we put all the new features. And the stable branch is the latest stable release that you should use in production. We release the development packages every day, usually. And you can identify stable and development packages using the version. So if you see a version with an even number at the end, in the minor version, let's say, that's a stable version. If you see a version which has an odd number at the end, that's a development version. So should I use a stable or a development version of the software? So as I said, the stable version is a release that we release from time to time, like 1-2 times per year. And this is supposed to be rock stable, to be used in production. We just release, in addition to 1 or 2 releases per year, it happens that we release additional releases when there is a bug fix, when we have security updates, or bug fixes that can include, I don't know, for instance, memory leaks, application crashes, security updates, etc. Instead, all the new features, they will go to the development branch. And as I said, we release a new development package almost every day, even more than 1 per day, usually overnight. And this can include, again, bug fixes, but first of all, they include new features. So the recommendation is, if you don't really need the latest feature, in production you should use the stable packages. But if the stable package doesn't include some feature that you need in your network to analyze, I don't know, a new protocol, or if you need some new feature, then of course you have to use the development packages. Just please avoid updating the software every day. If you use a development release in production, and ask us when it's time to update, because it may be that we introduce a new feature with some bug, something, so we know when it's time to update to the new development release. Okay, so let's see the installation on Linux. So if you go to, I see there is a question. Can we switch the version between stable and development? Yes, I will tell you how to do that in a moment. So if you go on our website on packages.ntop.org, you will see you can select, as we have seen before, the operating system. If you select Linux and click on download, then you can choose between Ubuntu and CentOS. Then if you select, for instance, Ubuntu, you can select the nightly build, so the development version, or the stable version. If you go on this page, you will get instructions for installing the repository that you will use to install the software. So the idea is that you configure our repository, and then you can use the standard commands like apt-get or yum on CentOS to install and manage the packages. Now, for those of you who downloaded the virtual machine, I already gave you instruction during the last session. We will see now how to run it. Or if you are using a physical system where you will install the software, you can skip the next slide. So just to recap, this is the slide from the last session where you have the link to download the virtual machine with our software pre-installed. This is an OVA file that you can open in VirtualBox or VMware or any hypervisor. You can import the virtual machine and run it. When you run it, you log into the virtual machine using the default credentials mbox. I will show you now. So I log into with mbox. Here you see, now you cannot see my mouse in the virtual machine, but here you can see the IP address of the virtual machine, like here. And you can use this IP address to connect to the virtual machine using a console, a shell with SSH. So in my case, the IP address was, I can do SSH mbox at IP address was 197 mbox. And now I'm inside the virtual machine. Now let's move this out of the window. So if you run the virtual machine, it should automatically use the network interface in bridge mode, so it should be able to get an IP address from your router, and you can connect using SSH, as we have seen now, using the IP address. Now, during the training, you will see blue slides. This means that there are follow-along sessions. So if I run some commands, you should do the same if you want to, of course. And you can use the virtual machine or your physical system. Now, if you select on our website the Ubuntu, for instance, repository, you get installation instruction that you can use on the virtual machine or on the physical system. And the virtual machine, you'll need to run those commands because the software is already installed. But if you're not running virtual machine and you're running Ubuntu, for instance, you can follow the instructions on the website. And here there is a copy of those instructions, so you don't need to take a note of them. You can just go on the website and check them. So in essence, what we have to do is to download our repository with wget, install the repository, and then update, run apt-get clean all and update to refresh the index for the packages of your operating system. At this point, you are able to install the software or update it, for instance. So you can run apt-get install and ntopng, for instance. Now, in this example, I'm installing pfring, which is our packet capture framework, and probe, which is our NetFlow probe, and ntopng, and then to disk. Again, you can find those instructions on our website at this link. After installing the software, or if you're running a virtual machine where the software is already installed, if you SSH, you can do ntopng -v uppercase, that means version, and you should get information about the ntopng application which is installed in your system. So you get information about the version, the license. We will see in detail later all the information that we have here. So this is to make sure that the software is installed. Now, by default, when you install the software, like ntopng is already running in your machine. We will see how to manage the service later, but in essence, you use the standard system control that you use on Ubuntu to check the service status. So you can do system control, status, and ntopng. And you should see that ntopng is active and running. At this point, if ntopng is running, you can connect to the web interface using the IP address on port 3000. So if I go here, specify the IP address, 97, sorry, port 3000. Then you can log into ntopng. By default, the username and password is admin. And the first time it will ask you to change the password. And you can log into the user interface. Now, today we will not focus, we will not see the user interface in detail. I will just show you how to log into and update ntopng. Now, coming back to the question, so the question was, can we switch the version between stable and development? So for instance, if you install the development packages and at some point you want to move to the stable because you see that there is a crash or something that is preventing you from running the software, or the other way around, you're using the stable, but you need a new feature and you want to move to the development, you can do that by running this script you can find on our website on the FAQ, on the frequently asked questions. And after running this command to clean up the environment, you can go ahead and install the repository that you want to use. So if you have the stable, then you install the development in the other way around. So this command, in essence, will clean up all the packages from ntop and the repository, and you're ready to restart with a new repository. Now, if you install the software and you want to update the software because there is a new version, you can do that. You have two options. You can use the standard, the package manager, so the standard command line that you will use to update any package on Ubuntu, for instance. That means using apt, so apt-get update, apt-get upgrade, because you have our repository, so you automatically get with an update the new version of the software. Or you can use the web interface. So in ntopng, you have the ability to update ntopng directly from the user interface. But this is available on Linux only. So this is not available on Windows or other operating system. So again, if you want to use, for instance, the command line, for instance, on Ubuntu, you will use apt. You just do apt-get update, apt-get upgrade. Otherwise, you can use the user interface. So I will show you how to do that. So if you go into the user interface, and you go in this menu on the top right, here there is a menu entry which is check for updates. ntopng automatically checks for updates during overnight. In this case, I just run the virtual machine, so it didn't check overnight the presence of an update. So we can go here and manually ask for an update, for checking for updates. So this should take a few seconds, up to 1 minute, let's say. In the meantime, I see there is a question in the chat. So for stable current version, switch the development should be okay, but what if switch from development to stable? Yes, it will work anyway, because the command that I gave you will clean up the system. So we'll remove any package from ntop. It can be stable or development. You're ready to configure the other repository that can be development or stable. So it works on both directions. So let's wait a few more seconds. We should be able to see. You're welcome. We'll be able to see if there is an update. And now ntopng is checking for updates. We will see here that there is an update and we can install it. But we can also enable the automatic updates. You can do that from settings preferences. So while ntopng is checking, I will show you this. I think this is the theme which is preventing the browser from loading. Let me see, because we have seen already this, something like this, no? And it seems it's just slow. Let me check. It seems this virtual machine is just running slow. Okay, we come back on this later. It seems this virtual machine is slow. Let me try restarting the virtual machine. Yeah, I think this is because I installed also ClickHouse data software on this virtual machine, but probably I'm running too many softwares at the same time. So let me restart the virtual machine, just stop ClickHouse to make sure we have enough memory. So the idea is that using that menu, you check for updates. and you will see that there is a new update available, and you can just click here and install the software. Now on FreeBSD, you can do something similar. So you can install our repository from packages.ntop.org. So you can use this, again, you get the examples on our website. So you can use package, add, and our repository. There are instructions there. And then you are ready to install the software using packages, package, install, and ntopng, for instance. If you're using OPN Sense, which is based on FreeBSD, you can use both the command line or the OPN Sense GUI, so the user interface. In fact, in that case, you just need to install the repository, then you can manage our packages using OPN Sense, the user interface. Because we have plugins for OPN Sense, you can go under the system menu, plugins, and you will find here, for instance, ntopng, the ntopng enterprise plugin, or the same applies to mprob, for instance, as you can see in this example. So in this case, just go here and click install. You will get the plugin, and you can use this plugin also to configure the software. When you install the software on OPN Sense, a new menu entry will appear for the ntopng and mprob configuration, and you can configure the service using the user interface. We have packages also for Windows. In this case, we don't have nightly builds and stable packages like for Linux, but in this case, we release selected development builds. That means that from time to time, we put on the website an installer for a selected development version. You can use the installer to install the software on Windows. There are also instructions on the user's guide. The same for macOS. So similar to Windows, we release selected builds, selected development releases for macOS, and we have an installer. So you can use the installer to install the software. Now, let's talk a little bit about the available versions that we have for ntopng. So let's see what is the license model for ntopng. Just a second. Okay. I see that there are questions. So Giuseppe says that I do not have the check for updates in the admin menu. This is strange, unless you are running ntopng from source code or in foreground manually. That should appear if you run ntopng as a service. So if you use system control to run ntopng, you should see the check for updates menu. Yeah, I've seen that Luca already replied. Now, if you're running our virtual machine, you should see that menu. Yeah, anyway, we can check this offline if you want. Let's go ahead with the training now, then we can check that together.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome. So the license model for ntopng is freemium. That means that we have a community version, which is free, and then we have multiple license versions, which are the Pro and Enterprise. This applies to all our applications like ntopng, but also to mprob, ntodisk, etc. So we have multiple models for each application based on the use case, network size, etc. You need the license key to unlock each version. Now let's focus on all the versions available for ntopng. So we have the community version, of course, which is the free version. Then we have the professional, the enterprise M, L, and we will release soon a new version, which is the XL. Then we have bundles. A bundle is a special license that unlocks a specific ntopng version, and in addition to ntopng, this bundle also unlocks, for instance, mprobe and then to disk. For instance, we have the Enterprise L bundle, which unlocks ntopng Enterprise L, mprobe Pro, and then to disk 1 gigabit. This is because in some cases you want to use, for instance, ntop and mprobe in the same box. You use mprobe for collecting flows and ntopng to visualize the data, or you use ntopng in combination with n2disk to have traffic visibility, and at the same time you want to store maybe the pickup data, so you want to implement the continuous recording. So with this license, you in essence save money. Instead of buying 2 or 3 licenses, you buy one, which includes all those softwares. All the ntopng versions, they all share the same core engine, because the core engine of ntopng is the same that you have in the community version. Then the professional and enterprise versions just add new features on top of that. So they had extra functionalities. So let's try to identify what is the target user based on the ntopng version. So the community version of ntopng is meant to be used by small offices, home users, to practice with the network. It's really, we will see what's included in the ntopng community, but in essence, it's a version that provides mostly real-time visibility and limited information about the traffic, which is fine for home, but probably is not enough for monitoring a professional environment or a large organization. Then we have the professional version, which is meant to be used in small enterprises. And then we have 2 and in future 3 enterprise versions that are supposed to be used in large organizations, large corporate networks by ISPs, data centers, etc. So let's see what's included in each version. So as I said, the community includes mostly real-time visibility. This means that you can see what's going on in your network right now. So you will have a basic dashboard with the top hosts. So the top generating more traffic, but you also have details about the traffic. So you can go and see all the active flows, so the active communications, details about them. You can see all the active hosts. So you get a full list of the hosts which are generating traffic right now in your network, and metrics about them. You also have some historical data, but this is limited. There are a few charts that show you, for instance, historical data about the traffic on an interface or something like that. Then we have the professional. This includes all the features available in the community version, plus an extended real-time visibility with more dashboards, more historical data with charts, reports about the traffic, and more historical flow analysis. And this also features LDAP authentication to authenticate the users using LDAP. Then we have the Enterprise M. This includes all the features included in the Pro version and the community. In addition to this has more features about alerting, for instance, the ability to send alerts to Elasticsearch. This includes support for instance, in case you use as NMP, you can pull the device and get historical data for each device or for each port of the device. So for each interface on the switch, for instance, you can see the historical data, so the traffic volume over time. You can use alerts based on the SNMP data. For instance, in the previous session, we mentioned that we can monitor the status of each port, and we can trigger an alert, for instance, if the status changes on the port. So if a port goes down, for instance. This provides also extended support for NetFlow devices. So when you collect NetFlow from routers and switches, here you get a new menu where you can monitor those devices and get historical data about the exporters, for instance. You can enable the integration with ntopng. This means that you can enable the continued traffic recording using the web interface. So you can start recording all the traffic, meaning packets, raw packets, in pickup files, and you can drill down using the user interface in ntopng. You can select, for instance, a time interval and get the pickup file matching that specific time interval, also applying filters. Or if you select a specific flow, you can download the pickup file, the packets for that flow, for that network communication. Or if you go, if you analyze the alerts that you get from ntopng, you can get the pickup file for each specific alert. This also features the interface disaggregation. That means that if you have, for instance, if you're monitoring traffic coming from a mirror port, for instance, of a switch, and you have multiple VLANs, this is just an example, you can disaggregate this traffic into multiple interfaces. Let me show you an example. Connecting event to a system. So if you go in ntopng, we will see that you can select if you have, you can have one or multiple interfaces where you get the traffic from the mirror to analyze. And you can select what is the interface that you want to use for analyzing the traffic. After selecting the interface, you can play around, you can use ntopng to visualize the traffic from that specific interface. Now, if you use the disaggregation on VLANs, for instance, you can have a traffic, a port mirror or switch, that will send you all the traffic for your network. Then if you have VLANs in your traffic, you can use disaggregation to disaggregate the traffic based on the VLAN. That means that you will have multiple interfaces here, one per VLAN, even if the physical interface is a single one where you receive the traffic from the switch. And you can select each VLAN and have a separate view of your traffic based on your VLAN. And with the interface disaggregation, you can do this for VLANs, but also for other other characteristics. So you can use, for instance, filters like BPR filters to define what is the criteria that you want to use to disaggregate the traffic. For instance, maybe you want to even to steer all the HTTP traffic on an interface and the rest of the traffic on another interface. So you can do this disaggregation up to the layer 7. Then we have the Enterprise L. Again, this includes all the features included in the Enterprise M, Pro, and the community. But in addition to them, here we have the behavioral analysis. So we have enhanced checks in ntopng that can analyze the traffic and trigger alerts. We have the service and periodicity maps, for instance. The service map is the ability in ntopng to detect what are the active services in your network. So if an host is providing a service on a specific port, you can see that. And this periodicity map is something that tells you if there is any periodic activity in your network. Like, I don't know, if you run a ping every 3 seconds, you will see that there is a periodic activity which is a ping that runs every 3 seconds. If your mail client is downloading email every minute, you will see that there is this client downloading the emails every minute. So it keeps track of periodic activities, and we are able to tell you if there is some change in the behavior of your network. Then we have the ability to for instance, ban hosts which are misbehaving, for instance, based on the score, which is an indicator that we use in ntopng based on what we see in the traffic, which is an indicator of compromise, let's say, or that is used to tell us that something requires attention. So we have this score, which is a number, and if a host is misbehaving, this score increases, we are able to ban this host, for instance, for the network. That means just visualizing this host as banned, or also actually banning the host from the network if you use ntopng in combination with mprobe IPS, for instance, which is a probe that you can run inline and actually block the traffic. Then in the Enterprise L, we also have the integration with VPN firewalls to implement what we call the identity management. So this is the ability to identify the user which is behind the traffic. For instance, if you have a network and you have employees working from home connecting using the VPN, it's usually difficult to identify which employee is behind a specific IP address that you see in your network. Also because this employee can change the IP address over time if disconnects and reconnects again to the VPN. With this integration, ntopng receives information from the VPN firewalls. We support many. And as soon as a client connects using the VPN, this information is propagated to ntopng, and ntopng can visualize in the traffic information what is the name of the user which is generating that specific traffic. And then we have the bundles. So as I said, for instance, the bundle L includes ntopng Enterprise L and Pro, and then 3 gigabit. The bundle is in essence a license key that unlocks all those softwares. This means also, we will see how the license work in a moment, but this means in essence that you have to run all the softwares in the same machine. So you cannot use a bundle that unlocks ntopng on one machine and then probably another machine, because the license key is connected to the hardware configuration of the machine. Okay, this table just recaps what we said already. There are also other limitations in addition to the features, also in terms of number of resources that you can use based on the license version. I don't want to bother you with numbers, but for instance, there is a maximum number of interfaces that you can monitor. So number of, for instance, physical ports you can use to receive traffic from, I don't know, a port mirror of a switch, for instance. And this changes according to the version. So for the community, the maximum number of interfaces is 8, same for Pro, then 16 for the enterprise M, 32 for the enterprise R. Is everything clear? I want to go ahead explaining you how the license and maintenance works now. Okay, let me go ahead. Okay, so just a second, I'm checking. Okay. So when you buy a license, you install a license. The license is perpetual. This means that you can run the software forever, and the license doesn't expire. But it includes 1 year of updates. So 1 year of maintenance, let's say. This means that you can run the software forever or update the software for 1 year. If you update the software after 1 year, then in that case, the license can expire and you need to buy the maintenance. The cost of the maintenance is a fraction of the cost of the license, should be 25% of the cost of the license. But again, if you don't update after 1 year, you can continue using the software with the original license. The license is based on the system ID, which is like a serial number for your system that you can use to generate the license. So the license works for a specific system ID. The system ID depends on the other configuration. So if you change, I don't know, a network adapter, the CPU, something, this system ID can change. In that case, you need to generate a new license. In order to handle hardware failures, we allow you to, in case this system ID changes, we allow you to use through our website, to use this page to migrate the license. That means that you retard the license and you generate a new one. And this is allowed one time. Because we assume that you don't have too many other failures in your machine's life. If it happens more than one time, you have to contact us directly. Now, as I said, the license is tied to the system ID. And this means that you cannot run the license on different machines, but it also means that you can run multiple instances of the software on the same machine, because there is this license that unlocks the software for the whole machine. How many times can we, there is a question, so how many times can we migrate the server by generate a license? So you can migrate the license one time using the website. If you have another failure or other reasons, you have to migrate the license more than one time, you have to contact us. So as I said, you can use a license on a single machine, or you can use multiple applications, multiple instances of the same application. on the same machine with the same license. For instance, if you have, if you need multiple instances of mprop because you are collecting NetFlow from multiple routers, for instance, you want to use multiple mprop instances to load bands, you need a single license. You need to buy multiple licenses. Instead, for pfring, which is our packet capture framework, so we have pfring zero copy, which is a set of drivers that we use to accelerate the packet capture performance. And pfring zero copy requires a license, and in this case, the license is per MAC address, so per network interface. In case of Intel Mellanox adapters, if you're using FPGA, the license is per adapter. So in this case, it's not per system, but per adapter. If you are using a virtual machine, in this case, the system ID, so the identifier that we use to generate the license, is per virtual machine because the hardware is virtualized. We have no way to check what is the actual hardware of the host system, the hypervisor. So in this case, the hardware is virtualized, and we generate the license for this virtualized hardware. But if you move the virtual machine from a system to another, you don't need to generate a new license for the same reason that the hardware is virtualized, and you can keep running the same license. For instance, if you use live migration to use the virtual machine from one system to another, even if they have different hardware configurations, they will work with the same license. Instead, if you're using a container, in this case, if you run, for instance, similar to the virtual machine, if you run multiple containers on the same box, in theory, you need a different license per container. But if you enable this option, for instance, in Docker, that provides visibility on the host configuration about networking, in this case, you can generate a single license for the machine, for the host, and you can use the same license for all the containers running on the same host. If you go, for instance, of course, in the user guide, but also if you go on Docker Hub to use to check the instructions for using the pre-built containers that we have for Docker, there are instructions for using this option. Now, if you want to test the software, if you don't want to buy a license because you want to evaluate the software, you have two options. First of all, our software runs for like 10 minutes in full mode. This is what we call the demo mode, so you can run it with no limitation in terms of features for performance for 10 minutes. After this time, the software stops. But if this is not enough to test the software, because you want to test it for a longer period, like for a few days, you can contact us and we provide evaluation licenses. Typically, we provide licenses that can work for 1 week in full mode. Now, so we have seen that the license is based on this system ID. So let's see how to get this system ID. In order to get this, we have seen that if you run ntopng-v uppercase, you get system information. So for instance, if you go on my virtual machine, I run ntopng-v uppercase, I get a bunch of information, including the software version of the operating system where the software is running and the system identifier. So this is the serial number of the machine, the system ID that you use to generate the license. There is a question in the chat. Do you have the guide for running the software on Docker? Yes, if you look at the user's guide, or if you just go on Docker Hub, you get the instructions for running all our softwares on Docker. So we have both Docker files that you can use to build your container image, or images which are ready to be used that are available on Docker Hub. So in order to buy a license, you can go on our shop, or if you have other requirements like volume, you need a volume discount or other requirement, you can contact us directly. So if you go on our website, shop.ntop.org, and you buy a license, what you get is an order ID that you receive by mail. And the order ID, together with the email address to use to buy the license, is used. They are used to let you generate the license. So in the email, you will get the order ID, email, and a link that you can use to generate the license. In order to generate the license, you need to run the software. As we have seen before, you can run, for instance, ntopng-v, or you can get the same information from the ntopng user interface in case of ntopng. Instead, for the other software like mprobe and 2disk, you need to use the command line. You get here all the information that you need to generate the license using your order ID and email. So what you need is the order ID, the system ID that you get from the ntopng output, and the version that you get from the ntopng output. So with all those information, you can generate the license. So yesterday, 2 days ago, after the session, I sent you licenses for ntopng Pro. And I sent you similar information that you get when you buy a license from the shop. So you get something like this, where you have the order ID, the email, and the link for generating the license, in this case, the ntopng license. So you can use those information to generate the license. So in essence, you go on this link, you put your order ID, email, and the ntopng version and system ID that you see running ntopng-v, SPFC, and you generate the license, and you get something like this. So as you can see, this is a command that you can use to install the license on your Linux system, for instance. So this is the license key, and it is stored under etc ntopng.license. Or you can do the same using the user interface. So in ntopng, using the web interface, you can install the license also. After installing the license, if you run again ntopng-v, you will see that there is a license which is permanent. That means that I have a license installed which is permanent. You will see the expiration of the maintenance and the license key. So this is to make sure that the license that you installed under etc ntopng.license is recognized. Everything is clear. Please stop me if I go too fast. If you install ntopng on Windows, you can also on this operating system, you can manage ntopng as a service. Also in this system, ntopng automatically starts when you install it, and you can control the service using files similar to commands similar to this. So ntopng/i to remove and install the service. I don't want to bother you with instructions for Windows. Instead, if you use ntopng on Linux, as I said, ntopng will automatically run when you install it using apt-get install ntopng. ntopng will generate a default configuration file, which is under etc ntopng.conf, and it will run. With the default configuration, ntopng will, if we go to the user interface again, with the default configuration, ntopng will capture and analyze the traffic from all the network interfaces available on the machine. If you want to run ntopng on selected interfaces, or if you want to configure ntopng with mprobe or change the configuration for any reason, you can go and modify this file. So let me show you. If I go here, etc ntopng.conf. Here I have a configuration for ntopng. So here I specified a few network interfaces that I want to use for capturing the traffic. As I said, by default, there is no configuration for the network interfaces, and that means that ntopng will open and capture traffic from all the network interfaces. Then we have other options. After changing the configuration file, you can use the standard system control command to stop, start, enable, disable the service. So you can do system control status to check the status, to see if it's running, etc. Yeah, so we have a slide for the question that we had before in the chat. So if you want to use ntopng on Docker as a container, you can go, you have two options. You can go on our GitHub and get here the Docker files to generate containers with ntopng or all the other softwares like, I don't know, mprobe, ntodisk. Or you can use the images that we have available on Docker Hub. And this is an example of command you can use to run ntopng using our ntopng stable image on Docker Hub. Okay, the last item for today is about the hardware sizing. So the question here is, sorry. The question here is, okay, I want to deploy ntopng in my network. I have, I don't know, 1 gigabit. I want to know what kind of CPU, number of cores, frequency, RAM, hard disk that I need to run ntopng. The answer to this is not really simple because it depends. Because if you have 1 gigabit, depending on the network, the amount of actual traffic rate in terms of packets per second can change, the protocols can change, the features that you enable in ntopng can change in ntopng or mprobe or ntodisk. And so there are many factors affecting this, but I want to give you some a ballpark, let's say, depending on the traffic speed that you have. Then you need to do some tuning based on the actual features that you enable and the actual configuration that you have. So there is a specific question in the chat. What is the requirement for implementing ntodisk 1 gig or 10 gig or 4 gig? Okay, I will answer to this question in a moment. So first of all, let's try to identify three sides of network: a small network, a medium network, and a large network. A small network, in this case, means a network with less than 100 megabits per second, hundreds of hosts, thousands of active communications flows per second. So this is what we can have in our home or in a small office. Then we can have a medium network, let's say traffic up to 1 gigabit per second with thousands of hosts and hundreds of thousands of active communications, active flows. This is a small business, medium business, let's say small to medium. Then we can identify a large network as a network with more than 1 gigabit, can be 1 to 10 gigabit, hundreds of thousands of hosts, and millions of flows. So let's try to give you a ballpark for sizing, for the other sizing, mainly CPU and memory for each of those scenarios. So under 100 megabits, probably a CPU with a couple of cores and a couple of gigabytes is enough. Now, again, this depends also. I mentioned several factors, and another important, really important factor is whether you are processing packets, so analyzing a traffic mirror from a switch, or you are analyzing flows using mprobe, collecting net flow from a router or a switch. If you are processing packets, that requires much more resources than processing flow information from a router, because if you have a 1 gigabit link to monitor, if you process packets, you can have up to 1.5 million packets per second, which is 1.5 events to process per second. If you are analyzing net flow from a router, with the same number of packets per second, the number of flows, which is aggregated information, is much less. So the number of events to handle per second in the software is much less, and that requires much less CPU. So in this case, we are talking about processing packets on an average network, on a network with average packet size, let's say. So again, under 100 megabits per second, a CPU with a couple of cores and a couple of gigabytes of memory should be enough. If you process traffic up to 1 gigabit per second, again, packets, you probably need like 4 cores, 4 gigabytes of memory. If you process net flow instead of packets, probably even 1 core or 2 cores is enough. As of the memory, you have also to pay attention to the number of, not just to the packet rate, but also to the number of active communications and active hosts that you have, because memory is used to store information about communications and hosts and other elements in your network. Of course, with the same traffic rate, let's say 1 gigabit, you might have, I don't know, 10 hosts or 100 hosts. In that case, the amount of memory that you require it changes, let's say, according to the number of hosts and flows. If you have to analyze the traffic of a network at 10 gigabit, probably you need like 8 cores, at least 16 gigabytes of memory. Now, if you have to analyze bigger networks like 40 gigabit, you use, first of all, a specific architecture for processing the traffic. So you don't need ntopng is not enough. You need to use ntopng in combination with other pieces of software that we have, like mprobe. You need more cores than this, much more memory. We will see something about tuning the performance of ntopng and scale with the traffic rate in the next session, actually the fourth session. So I've seen that there is a question about ntodisk, and yeah, Luca provided you a link from the user's guide. But let's say that if you have to process, if you have to dump the traffic at 1 gig, actually, in the fourth session, I will talk about this, but just to introduce you this, if you have to dump the traffic at 1 gigabit within to disk, any CPU is good, like this, a couple of cores. But if you start moving to 10 gigabit, 40 gigabit, let's say at 10 gigabit, you need 6 cores. At 40 gigabit, you need 8, 12 cores. Let's say at 40 gigabit, you need 8, 12 cores using a CPU like an Intel Scalable Gold with at least 3 gigahertz. And you need to also pay attention to the memory that you use. Again, we will see this, but you have to make sure that your memory configuration is optimal. So that means that you need to use all the memory channels which are supported by the CPU. So there are a few considerations. And even more important is the storage configuration. Because if you dump traffic at 1 gigabit, then a single disk, even a spinning disk, is enough and can keep up with the performance. And then there are also considerations about the data retention, so the amount of data that you can store. If you want to dump traffic at 10 gigabit, you need a few disks. So if you're using hard disks, spinning disks, you need like 8 disks to dump the traffic using in the right configuration, to dump the traffic in parallel and get enough performance to keep up with 10 gigabit per second. If you move to 40 gigabit or even 100 gigabit, you need special configurations. At 40 gigabit, you can still survive with the right controller and many disks, but if you move at 100 gigabit, we will see that you need specific storage configurations, like using multiple NVMe disks, which are PCI disks that you attach on the PCI bus, and they are really fast, but you still have to use them, multiple of them in parallel. And then again, you have to consider also data retention, because the higher is the speed of the link, the more is the space that you need on disk. To keep, of course, a reasonable amount of data, especially considering the time window that you want to handle. Okay, it seems we exhausted the arguments for today. If you have questions, please. Answering to it was Giuseppe. I think the reason you don't see the menu for the updates is that if you have connectivity issues, like in this case, so if your virtual machine is not able to connect to internet, you will see here, you will notice that there is this badge which is reporting offline, no internet connectivity. And in that case, the menu will not appear here. Probably this is the case. Can you check if you have this airplane here badge? In the meantime, if there is someone which has some question, please raise your hand.
Yes, I have the airplane, but I am able to ping Google, for example.
Okay.
So I am in a home network with DHP. So I am connected to the internet and also the VM.
Okay. So probably the check that we use to see if there is internet connectivity is checking some service which is not allowed in your case. So let me, I will send you instructions for checking this, okay?
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. So there is another question. Look, already answered. So he wants to know the type of network adapter that should be used based on the network speed, I guess. So let's say up to 1 2 gigabit per second, you can use any network adapter for capturing the traffic. That can be for ntopng or for dumping pickup data to disk. If you move up to 10 gigabit per second, you should use Intel or Mellanox adapters, which are supported by our PFRIN zero copy drivers. If you move to 40, 100 gigabit, then you need to use, it depends. For the traffic analysis, you can still use Intel and Mellanox, because we have technologies that allows us to load balance the traffic to multiple CPU cores using multiple queues or streams on the adapters. And we can scale with the performance, and we can run, for instance, our probes to analyze the traffic, send information to ntopng. So we are able, let's say, to scale up to 100 gigabit using standard adapters, I mean Intel or Mellanox, using our PFRIN zero copy drivers. Instead, if you want to implement the continuous recording using N2Disk, so you want to store pickup data to disk, in that case, we will see that we need a configuration where you have a single stream of data from the network to the disk. So you cannot distribute, or at least you should avoid distributing the load to multiple streams. And in that case, an FPGA adapter is required. So to scale at 40, 100 gigabit, you should use an adapter like Napatech, Fiberblades, one of those adapters, because they're really optimized in moving data in chunks from the network to memory, and then from memory to disk using N2Disk. So yeah. Any other question? By the way, these sessions are recorded. So if you need to, if you want to listen again to the session, or if someone is missing one session, we can provide you the recording. Okay, if you don't have other questions, we can close here this session. The next one will be on Tuesday. My colleague Matteo will show you a little bit the ntopng user interface, and yeah, we'll talk about the checks that we have in ntopng, the behavioral analysis, the score. So you will see a demo of ntopng live. Okay, so thank you, everyone. See you to the next session.